I'm interviewing a serving frontline member of the police who served the community for about 30 years to hear his take on the COVID-19 public health response strategy of the New Zealand government. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
What is your main role with the New Zealand Police?
Public safety team officer, a frontline general duties police officer.
And that's been the bulk of your career with the police?
Yes.
Right, so frontline, dealing with the community, all sorts of jobs every day.
Bread and butter policing.
How did your journey with the COVID-19 issue begin for you, and how did it impact your role with the police?
I worked during the first lockdown. Then we got through to yet another lockdown. I continued with my normal duties, wasn't seconded anywhere else. Like a lot of people got taken off their roles and put on the border checkpoints. I avoided that. Then the vaccine mandates came in. So everything seemed to roll in really quickly. Vaccine mandates, and then our mandate was coming. I knew it was coming because there'd been noise about it. And then towards late 2021, they basically started telling us that we're going to get mandated. It was pending. That caused a lot of stress because I did not want to take a COVID-19 vaccination. It was an interesting situation with the mandates because with the vaccine passports, which I did not have obviously, so it was ironic because I was good enough to go to work every day, do my job, serve the public, but at the end of my day, I was not good enough to go and get a haircut, go to a cafe, take my family out to dinner. I was a second-class citizen, but I was still good enough to go to work.
Exactly, putting your life on the line if needed.
Yeah, so I was good enough for that, but I couldn't go get a haircut.
In sort of mid to late 2020, when the discussions between the government and the media that there was a COVID-19 injection coming, one of the things that people queried the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, a lot was whether there would be any policies that would coerce people to take the jab, for example, a no jab, no job policy. If you don't get the jab, you're going to lose your job. She was asked that several times. She point blank categorically said, no, there's no chance of that. Are you aware that she made that statement?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember her saying it.
So how did you feel being a frontline member of the police when suddenly a blatant turnaround occurred like this, where you were forced in a corner where if you didn't get the jab, you were going to get treated indifferently, of course, because the vaccine mandates, the vaccine passports, etc. But how did that make you feel that potentially your boss, the Prime Minister, even though we know the Commissioner of the Police is the boss of the police, but how did you feel that the Prime Minister had made such a clear backtrack and turnaround on?
She's a politician, so that doesn't surprise me. But when that mandate's knocking on your door, especially when you have a family to look after, bills to pay, you cannot afford to lose your job.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your job because it's a job you enjoy doing. When you're in the police, it becomes a big part of who you are. You're a police officer. That's your bread and butter. That's what you do. And then you're faced with that prospect of your career ending, not because you've done anything bad, not because you've committed any offence or anything like that, but because you're standing up for your principles and your bodily autonomy.
You refused to take the jab, which under normal circumstances, that seems like pretty much a natural human right. What was it about the COVID-19 injection that made you nervous about it? What made you think, no, I'm not undertaking this?
I credit my partner for putting me on the path to look at it closer because we're a bit behind. She was looking at what was happening overseas and she didn't like what she was seeing and what she was hearing, not through mainstream media, but through non-mainstream media and other outlets. She pointed me in a direction and told me to look at it for myself, to make up my own mind. Based on what she had seen, she did not want me taking the jab because she was worried for my health. She was scared that something bad was going to happen to me. I was actually going to take the jab because I didn't want to lose my job, and I was thinking of my family and my ability to support them and look after them. So I was going to suck it up and take one for the team, as it were. And it distressed her so much that I had another look at it. And in the end, actually, I came to the realisation that it wasn't what they were saying. It was not safe. It was not effective. And I was fearful of taking the jab because I value my health and I did not want to compromise my health. And the more I was looking at, particularly from overseas in countries like Israel, which are well ahead of us with the vaccine, and the UK, I could see that people are getting sick. This isn't safe and it's not effective, and my warning bells are going off in my head. So I made that firm decision then, said, look, I'll find something else to do with my life, but I'm no good to my family dead.
Exactly. Now, you've made that decision to not have the jab, you've informed your bosses. What next?
So D-Day was midnight on the 16th of January. That was D-Day. You had to have your first jab and show evidence of it, or you'd be stood down. And that's what happened. So I was served my stand-down papers on the 17th of January, along with a bunch of other police officers around the country, which entailed me handing in my ID. I couldn't go into any police station other than public counter. Like I was being investigated for something really, really bad. My perception of being stood down from the police is that you're being investigated for a serious breach of code of conduct, or you're under criminal investigation or prosecution. That's my perception of being stood down. I was being stood down for standing up for my right to bodily autonomy, which is in the Bill of Rights, to refuse unwanted medical treatment, and I didn't want it.
So you've gone through that stage, you make it clear you're not going to get it, they serve you your warning papers. Considering you've dedicated 30 years of your life to the family in blue, it seemed like a pretty short, cold way of dealing with you.
Treated like garbage, just disposable. Obviously, let's just make it clear, we're just a bum on a seat and a name on a staff list. Just a number, that's all we are. The end result of all this is I've chosen to return because I don't work for them, I work for my community. That's who I work for. Catch bad guys, protect good people from bad people. That's what it's always been about. But I know that the organisation has lost some really good officers with decades of experience that have chosen not to return. Just a gross sense of betrayal that they've felt and the disgust of the organisation.
It's funny you should mention that because there was a very, very strong rumour throughout the police that an inspector in Auckland Police, after he had received his jabs, actually ended up fainting on the job. Have you heard of that at all?
I'm aware of an inspector that received his vaccine and he subsequently had a massive heart attack and he has myocarditis, essentially.
Right.
And my understanding is attributable to the vaccine.
How did your peers react to you doing this at your station, where you work from?
My peers were supportive. They respected the stand that I'd taken. They realised I was standing by my principles. They didn't want me to lose my job, but they were supportive. I had no negative reaction, which was not the case for everybody in my position. So I was extremely fortunate.
So are you aware of peer pressure, of exclusion, behaviour towards other police that had refused the jab? Was there any sort of peer pressure to comply or punishment meted out by social exclusion that you're aware of?
Subsequently become aware of at some stations that, there was vaccinated officers refused to work with unvaccinated officers, obviously before the mandates. They refused to work with them, or be in the same car of them. They were ostracised, threats of violence, bizarre stuff. And these are from officers that work together, that know each other, but just that fear and hysteria whipped up by the government just about COVID, it just turned work colleagues that have known each other for years against each other, all because they were standing by their principles and refusing to take an unproven medical procedure.
As a member of the police and now working again, the police then were taken to court along with the government. It was then decided that the mandates were basically unlawful. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. You've gone back to work now. Given you've experienced a form of tyranny against your own rights and freedoms and choices, how do you feel now about the potential that the government may use you and police to enforce COVID-19 rules that will potentially offend against the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990?
Just going back to what you were saying earlier, I actually got fired. I was served my dismissal papers. I was dismissed, notice of dismissal from the New Zealand Police. So the court case was won just before my 4 weeks notice of dismissal came up. So going back to what you've asked, I can speak for me personally and for young guys and cops that I know now. It's just, I will not enforce tyranny. I won't do it. I remember during the first lockdown and they wanted us to stop people on the road that we saw at night. Make sure you stop people while they're out and about. Stop them, ask them why they're breaching curfew essentially for essential travel, not essential travel. And it was pointed out that on what basis are we stopping these people? Oh, because we don't have the power under any act to stop them to see why are you out on the road in breach of a COVID lockdown. We don't have that authority. At the time, we didn't. So we were told, just use the Land Transport Act or something like that. Fish and chip it, which was ridiculous.
Make it up on the fly.
Well, they subsequently changed it and passed legislation to enable, for during the second lockdown, to be able to do that. Yeah, but stuff like that. And as you're saying, this with tyranny, I won't enforce tyranny. If I get put in a position where I'm expected to enforce that kind of, I'll walk away. I can't do it, and I won't do it. I'm here to serve the community, not enslave it.
Exactly. So you and I have spoken about the COVID-19 Health Response Act 2020. In it, there's a provision, for example, whereby either a constable or a duly authorised officer can enter into a home to do COVID-19 checks, whether they be to actually take the inhabitants of the home out of there and get a medical procedure performed on them by way of maybe a COVID-19 test, maybe a nasal, could be anything test, based on a coronavirus that they say by their own figures has a 99.8% survival rating if you come into contact with it. So those figures tell us that it's in cooey of a bad seasonal flu that we live through each year in this country. How do you feel that this government has introduced the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act 2020 to enter someone's house to do that, to restrict their liberty, essentially arrest them, take them into custody to perform a test on them? Is that frightening to you as a policeman?
Everyone should be frightened by that. Everybody should be. Because that's about control. It's got nothing to do with public health or safety. That's about control and the abuse of government power. I remember with the lockdowns and that, the number of calls police were receiving with neighbours telltailing on other neighbours, family members, calling the police, saying, oh, my neighbour has an unauthorised visitor. Oh, my neighbour has extra people at their house. It was ridiculous. I'm sure it must have been hundreds of phone calls a day all over the country of neighbours narking, essentially, on their own neighbours and on family members for breaching COVID-19. That's like 1930s Germany stuff.
It is.
My neighbour is Jewish. My neighbour is hiding a Jewish person in their house. What's the difference? We were getting sent to those jobs and you feel like a fool. I felt like an absolute fool going to those jobs, especially for something, because at that stage I was aware that COVID 99.8% survival rate. It was ridiculous. An absolute overreach, and I felt so dumb responding to those jobs. And what do you seriously want me to do? Barge into these people's houses and look for people hiding in the cupboard? I'm not doing that.
So given the relationship between the New Zealand government and the New Zealand media paints people like you as a tinfoil hat wearing,
conspiracy theorist,
unclean, unhygienic, superhero costume wearing, keyboard warrior. Are you a nut job?
Pretty sure I'm not a nut job. I think part of being in the police is your ability to think critically and to investigate.
And that's what you've done?
And be suspicious. Well, yeah, it wasn't hard to do a little bit of research and take the time. You know, I know, for me, I made my choice. I know officers that did not want that jab for sure. There were officers that did not want to take that jab, but they've got young families to support. They had no choice. I have a friend of mine, he waited till the last possible moment to get that jab, and he's angry because he knew what I knew, but he's a young family, a mortgage to pay. He was angry, really angry and bitter at being forced into that position. He shouldn't have been forced into that position. It's like risk your own health or lose your job. That's not an option.
And then the mandates are reversed and he's left with having had the shot.
Yeah, and as you know, more information comes to hand all the time. And now there's a lot of people that it's like they're a ticking time bomb. I'm aware that all-cause mortality is
23% up?
Yeah, in the US it's 40% up. The most common cause of death in Alberta, Canada, is apparently cause unknown. I'm waiting for them to bring out a vaccine for cause unknown.
Now, the Wellington protest, the occupation of the Parliament grounds, was portrayed by the New Zealand media as being full of violent far-right extremists. In this documentary, we're covering some of the footage from that, including interviews with police that were down there saying things were beautiful, things are great, no problem. I'm a pastor, some of my ministry family members were down there and you had them ministering to people, you had the Hare Krishna tent feeding people, you had first aid tent, you had kids area, and it was all good until about the 10th of February, and then at the end of the occupation time when police mobilised to remove the protesters. At least 95% of those people had good intentions being there, they weren't violent.
Yeah, I'd agree. From what I could see, my partner went down there, and I have friends, and I know a former officer that went down there as well. Yeah, nurses, teachers.
Yep, there were some serving police down there.
Yeah. Just but people that had been mandated out of their jobs, so their concerns were legitimate. Absolutely, and it was peaceful.
We've looked at some of the footage today of enforced arrests being made on some of the people that were in the crowd, and that you and I spoke extensively about some of the realities of dealing with a violent crowd in a blue uniform. And it's tricky, you have to think on your feet, sometimes things just happen and you got to do what you got to do, I accept that. But there's a couple of clear instances where these guys and girls stepped over the line down there harming and hurting people. When you see footage like that, of police being used in this way to end an activity that's guaranteed by the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act, again, 1990. How do you feel when you see that type of thuggery going on?
Absolutely agree. The optics for some of those things really bad. I was not there, but I agree. Some of the optics that I saw were bad, and some of the video that I've seen, it's pretty hard to justify the use of force. For some of the stuff I've seen here, it's hard, very hard to justify, very hard.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
It is a tough one, and those poor men and women that were sent down there to deal with that, they were put in the meat grinder. And I know some of the people that went down there, they're good cops. They're not thugs, they're not horrible people, they're good cops that I've served with and that I'd stand with. And I think there's some things that took place that can't be justified.
So the members of Parliament in Parliament during that protest ignored them. They called them the river of filth. They called them the unwashed, the unclean sector of New Zealand. And as you say, there are nurses, teachers, doctors,
Just normal, just good people.
just ordinary
Good people that had lost their jobs and their careers on a mandate.
Yep,
Because
based on a 99.8% survivable.
Which is just when you reflect on that, it's ridiculous.
What's your own personal opinion, I guess? How do you rate a parliament full of 121 odd members of the House of Representatives, i.e. your members of parliament, MPs? How do you feel when they sit back, ignore all these people, ostracise them, persecute them? The Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, did some very, very horrible and nasty things to them. What's your estimation of a government that does that and then absolutely ignores the authority of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990? Because under the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990, as you and I both know, there's a guarantee for peaceful assembly and expression of thought and speech. Now, we could use layman's terms and say that's access to the village square, right, to sound out your thoughts and beliefs, which is guaranteed. What do you think about a government that calls these people river of filth and deploys police because these people are against their narrative and ideology?
It's coming back to 1930s Germany, sort of, isn't it? Stigmatising a group of people and labelling them. I think the thing with that protest is, unfortunately, towards the latter stages of it particularly, I think different groups hijacked that protest.
Yep.
And things just got messy and untidy and got driven to that point where some sort of intervention was inevitable because it stopped being what it was and became something else. A lot of it, I think, could have been avoided if the government or someone from the government had at least come and heard them out and given them some sort of reassurance about mandates or whatever. They could have at least just heard them out instead of hiding behind their walls and just ignoring it like it's not there and turning on sprinkler systems, soaking people. I mean,
And loud music,
yeah,
non-stop.
yeah. So how hard is it to actually go and have some dialogue with people? And they headed off at the pass. It got messy. Maybe it didn't have to get that messy. If someone had actually taken the time to listen to those, what are genuine concerns? I mean, look, even today, we're short of nurses. And how many nurses are still mandated out of their jobs that are just doing something else now, if anything? Teachers. We need teachers as well. There's all these teachers that have lost their jobs. And now we know, Pfizer's admitted that they did no testing for transmission. So it doesn't stop transmission.
It's all out there.
So that's from Pfizer. So all those teachers losing their job because they're going to make those little kiddies sick in their classroom if they got COVID was a lie.
One last question for you. When you see the government end the traffic light system, which is the COVID-19 response acts, infrastructure or legislation that enables the government to respond and lock down and arrest people for not obeying COVID-19 laws or lose your job through mandates and getting into trouble for not wearing your mask, they've dropped it. They've completely dropped it. But they're still pushing, go get your jab, go get your jab, go get your jab. It's all out now in Ministry of Health data, world global data, that the jab was never going to stop you from getting it and getting sick, which they promised. It was never going to stop you from being infectious, which they guaranteed. But the big one that they guaranteed was that this injection was 100% safe.
And effective.
And effective.
How many times did you hear that? Safe and effective.
Every
safe
day,
and effective.
1 p.m.
Every day, but also on the radio for radio ads. And on the TV. Safe and
non-stop.
effective, safe and effective, safe and effective.
Right. So as of today, we've got 64,000 harmed New Zealanders on the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, calm, medsafe.govt. Out of that number, we know that 3,500 New Zealanders have been seriously harmed, including at least 1,000 sufferers of myocarditis, pericarditis, hundreds of strokes, heart attacks, 177 adult deaths, 66 babies that have died in the womb. They promised that this vaccine was 100% safe. My final question to you is this. Do you feel there is an agenda, an ideology that's being pushed here?
Well, they lied, didn't they? So, an agenda and ideology. Well, how conspiracy theorist do you want to get?
Exactly.
How conspiracy theorists do you want to get? Because that's a deep hole. But the simple fact is they lied, and they knew they were lying when they lied. And how many people accepted that lie, did what they thought was the right thing for the good of the community and for their families and for themselves, did the right thing, and are now extremely sick or have died, or people have lost loved ones, and there's no comeback. There's no repercussions for anyone. Not Pfizer or the other companies, not the government, no one. These poor people are suffering and will continue to do so, and the people responsible for feeding them those lies and feeding fear into them, there's no consequence for them, they just carry on.
Do they need to be held accountable?
Absolutely. Look, say in my job, if I commit an offence, I do something so heinous, and as a result of I have an error of judgment, or I make a call and say it severely injures a person or kills a person because of my error of judgment or my outright dishonesty, I would expect to be held accountable, and I should be. But that's just me. I'm just an ordinary citizen. I'm just a person. These people, they sit at the top of the food chain. Jacinda Ardern is not going to be held accountable. Chris Hipkins is not going to be held accountable.
Thank you for your time today. It was important to me to get your story because I respect the police organisation. For a short time I was a member of it, and I believe that there is a lot of good people in the police like you. And I want to thank you for your stand, and I want to thank you for protecting the community and serving it. And I'm hoping that this interview will restore confidence in the police by a lot of people that have been very, very concerned about it. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, no worries at all. And as just to reiterate, there are a lot of good police officers out there. The Wellington thing tainted a lot of people, but I can assure you there are a lot of good cops that just come to work every day, just try to do the best job that they can do, go home to their families.
Amen. So let's keep this journey going because there's a lot of work to do to expose the river of lies.